at Teladoc Health, we have 5 cultural attributes that are very, very important to us. And one of those is innovation, and one of those is collaboration. So I think you have to create training opportunities that really promote um, 2 of those. We always want to promote all 5, but I think, innovation and collaboration are really key to meeting our strategic business goals. That's part of what we're doing. Teladoc Health has always been a leader in the virtual healthcare space. And, that means we have to always be constantly innovating and transforming. Um, and a very wise person in our organization just recently reminded me that transformation never stops. It's a constant spin. You don't just transform and then stop and then try again. It's always happening.
Welcome to the LearnOps Leadership Series. Today I'm super excited to be hosting Carrie Berg, the Vice President of Learning and Development at Teladoc Health. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So for those of you who don't know, in addition to Carrie being a VP of L&D, she's the member of Forbes HR Council and also, which is super cool, an advisor for Women in Leadership program at the George Washington University, which is super interesting as well. Would love to hear, Carrie, how you even got started into L&D, in L&D. What's your background there?
Yeah, so I've been a little bit all over the place, but I actually have a clinical background and started off in cardiac rehab and exercise science. And then I went to go work for a couple pharmaceutical companies and a couple medical device companies in the cardiovascular space, and was a sales rep and a sales manager and a field engineer. And I ended up doing a lot of training because I had this cardiology background and was working with a lot of people who didn't have that. And so I naturally kind of started going into sales training, and ended up going back to school to get my MBA, and really kind of kept going in the sales training commercial side of the business, and started off working with a lot of startup companies where they were hiring me to build their sales training programs. And then after a while, they needed support for all of enterprise learning and development. And the analogy I always use is learning development is more like an 8-lane highway, and sales training is a little bit more like a 2-lane highway. And I like to pass cars and I like to move around and I like my day to be different. And so learning and development opens the doorway to so many more broader opportunities to do more with more people, on a variety of topics. And so, yeah, I think learning and development is my sweet spot as far as always keeping me engaged and interested in what's going on.
That's so cool. So, started in sales training, sales enablement, and moved to across the organization. Are there particular areas that you're the most passionate about, whether it's leadership development, partnering with different departments in the company, and just helping them problem solve with learning solutions, or anything like that, or you just like really focusing across the board?
I mean, I love focusing across the board, but I certainly have my areas I'm passionate about. And I think number one is leadership development. And a big chunk of that is supporting women leaders in an organization and encouraging them to have a voice and to hone their skills, and learn how to, influence and persuade and stand up for themselves, is a huge passion of mine. I think I also enjoy trying to think out of the box for a lot of my specialty departments, like our engineering teams, or research and development, and trying to find ways to grow their skills, as that's a very, very specific part of the business when you're talking about AI or artificial intelligence and things like that. That's not really a learning and development area of expertise. However, I can, think of and work on a variety of ways of getting them access to that content. And I like that it forces me to think out of the box in order to do that.
Well, that's really interesting as well. I mean, at Cognota, obviously, we have a lot of engineers, and and just the way that a lot of them think is very different to like a sales team, for example, right? And so I can see that being super valuable, and something that actually after this call, I want to talk to our head of people to start putting programs together for them too. because that's really interesting. Um, and um, and so, based off of going from sales enablement then into more broader L&D, which is really exciting. Um, you know, we've seen a lot of change, especially since returning to work in a more fulsome way since the pandemic and whatnot. I mean, what is the biggest change that you're noticing in the industry over the last several years when it comes to learning and development, and how teams are operating as well?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think everybody is trying to find the silver bullet or the secret sauce to what's the right way to deliver content, what's the right way to drive culture, what's the right way to drive engagement. And everybody is kind of, well, what are you doing? And what are you doing? And then I think that it's important to get ideas from others, but I think you really have to look inside your organization and understand what are the cultural components to your organization that are most important, and how do we try to keep those alive, regardless of where we are. It means being a little creative. I think for us, we had a little bit of a remote culture before all of this happened. So we had a little bit of processes and tools in place to drive remote engagement. Um, I think, you know, we're looking at every single learning opportunity that we provide to understand how do we maximize that in a hybrid environment. So how do you deliver material or content when you have some people in the room and some people on Zoom, so to speak. And so I think it's unique to every organization, and you have to kind of get your leaders aligned to expectations of what they want things to look like. And I think from there you can help develop the right programs and tools and even activities to drive engagement. From there.
Being a little bit remote and having that hybrid before any of this, and kind of being ahead of the game in that regard. um, what what role has learning and development outside of culture? It seems like that's a big area that the L&D team is helping with as well, from the sounds of it. um, what other areas is the L&D department playing in supporting some of the business strategy and performance initiatives as well?
Yeah. So, well, first off, I think it's really important that learning and development understand what's going on with the business and have a business based mindset. Every program should have an impact and a known and measurable impact. So I'll just add that there. I think for me, it's really been about programs that remind us why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing in the company, and what is our mission, and what are our values. At Teladoc Health, we have 5 cultural attributes that are very, very important to us, and one of those is innovation, and one of those is collaboration. So I think you have to create training opportunities that really promote um, 2 of those. We always want to promote all 5, but I think innovation and collaboration are really key to meeting our strategic business goals. That's part of what we're doing. Teladoc Health has always been a leader in the virtual healthcare space. And, that means we have to always be constantly innovating and transforming. Um, a very wise person in our organization just recently reminded me that transformation never stops. It's a constant spin. You don't just transform and then stop and then try again. It's always happening. So I think in learning and development, you should always be looking at your programs and changing them every single time you do them, and looking at, okay, how can this content be better? Should I change this message? Should I do this differently? Should I even stop this and do a totally different program? So I think all of those things combined help make sure that you're staying on top of what's going on in the business, and that you're always meeting the needs of the business.
And I appreciate a lot, the fact about how L&D should be aligned to strategy, performance, and measuring impact. I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday, in a Brandon Hall webinar we were doing, who's a CLO, retired CLO now, and that was a topic of discussion, and we were going into a lot of research in the industry on that. So that's really good to hear. Do you also have business partners that you support in the company, or what's the core uh, mission and vision on how you are setting up L&D and how you've set up L&D at Teladoc, and where you're going to be taking it next?
Yeah, I think, well, our situation is a little unique because Teladoc Health purchased my previous company. And prior to that, they actually did not have a formal learning and development team. So when they purchased us, we kind of came over with all of our existing programs. And there was such a hunger and need for all of those that we had that we quickly tried to execute on our existing programs and get them scaled up, from 800 employees to nearly 4,000. Um, but I think I do have strategic partners throughout the business. I consider members of the executive team my strategic partners. I also consider our HR business partners that work closely with our executive team, um, you know, important allies, and they have a lot of information and they know a lot about what's going on, so they can help me understand gaps. Um, where programs, where we need to solve for particular programs like leadership development, management programs, and things like that. I also think that there's a big part of that is having a relationship with your people who can give you data and understanding what's going on in the business. Those I also consider like an important partner that I think a lot of learning and development folks forget to think about. So the employee engagement survey, so that's run by our people operations team. I want to understand that data. I want to understand what people are saying, and what they know and they don't know. So I'll give you an example of this. There's a stat out there, I think from like McKinsey, where 64% of employees don't understand the existing learning and development programs available in their company. And when we run our employee engagement survey, I'm trying to understand how we compare to that, right? So do our employees actually aware of our programs, period?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, anything that we have. And it's slow, like, not all of our employees know and understand. So that means that um, I need to strengthen those partnerships. And I also probably really need to focus on marketing my department within and become a marketer at the same time. So one of those 8 lanes you're on as a learning and development person is one of them is marketing and branding. You have to sell what you're doing, and be talking about it all the time. So I do think partnerships are really, really important. I do think that oftentimes L&D leaders forget about the data partnership and understanding where we understand where our people are. Um, and then probably another partner is the marketing team to help me brand my programs and get them out in front of everybody. And so we just recently formalized, our brand name, which is Teladoc Health Advance, because our job is to advance the career of everybody in the organization. And so that's our brand name. And we're working on, our webpage and all of that stuff so we can help market what we do and share more of the programs we've created in alignment with our strategic partners in the business.
I think going through name changes and branding exercise is really fun. It's a lot of work. We just did that. Went from Synapse to Cognota just this week, actually. This week. So very exciting. Do you have any tips or processes that you've put in place, processes or tips that you could recommend to kind of viewers around best practices or what you're doing to manage those processes? I mean, business is moving so quickly. There's a lot of data. How do you filter and prioritize and like even just hear about the data to then start figuring out with your team, like how do we prioritize certain initiatives based off of what we're hearing?
Yeah, I think number one, the first couple of things that come to mind is what's the impact and what's the potential impact, and then scale. So you get a lot of feedback in learning and development. You get a lot of opinions in learning and development because everybody has a way that they like to be trained and they want you to deliver that content in their preferred mechanism. And that isn't always scalable. And it isn't always impactful. either. We want to make impactful programs. So I think as I'm thinking about processes and taking in all that data and figuring out what to do with it, if I'm just thinking about one program in particular, I've most likely created that program because a partner has asked for it, a strategic partner, or because there's been indication in the feedback and other data elements that we need this program. And the first thing I'm going to do is try to understand how many employees could this impact. So if we did a program on this, like let's just say artificial intelligence. So if we did this whole program on artificial intelligence, would this impact every employee? No. Would what departments would this impact? Would them gaining knowledge in this skill have a potential impact to the business? Like would it give them change of behavior, give them a new tool to use, identify something different? Um, and then I would try to figure out the best ways to roll that out in a cost efficient, time efficient manner, and then put some metrics behind that to understand if it's really changing behavior and if we're getting a return on investment. So, kind of pulling on the Kirkpatrick levels to really measure the effectiveness of that. But I view my process of doing all of that like it's kind of like an intake form, and we have very specific questions that we're asking. And from a strategic perspective, again, going back to that, I'm always trying to understand impact and my ability to scale a program before I
Yeah, I
launch.
love that. So you're being outcome focused and really looking and envisioning what's the end game if we're going to spend any time here. What's the outcome? What does this mean for the business? What does this mean for our people? And then work backwards from there, which is really insightful because it's so easy to fall for the trap where somebody comes to you, says we need this, and it might be even a VP. And to your point earlier on, even helping to coach certain people in the company about pushing back, like I think that's a great skill always to have, right? So you need to do it sometimes because you shouldn't be developing everything. You should be focused on impact and scale for sure. So it's really insightful as well. When you're consulting and working with these partners, so that they come in from intake, you're trying to get to outcomes and what this means for the business. Um, how are you getting access to that data? Are you just working with the head of the department? Are they putting you in touch with subject matter experts? Like, how deep do your consultations go?
I try to get my hands on as much information as I possibly can, and I ask for it.
Yeah,
Like and I am naturally a data centric person. The more information I have, the better that I feel I can function and provide what's needed. And I don't do well with hyperbole, like when they're like, oh, everybody needs this and everybody needs that, and then it ends up being like one or two people. I need data to really understand that, because learning and development is a lean team. My team is lean. We have a lean budget. We have to we have to dig for that data. We have to ask for it. We actually have to really learn how to ask well thought of, open ended questions to get to what we need to get to, so we can provide the best thing that we can provide. And that's another like really important skill to me for any L&D person, is you got to get good at asking
yeah,
questions, and you have to be good at asking open ended questions that get people thinking, because otherwise you're just going to be an L&D team that makes training for broken processes and broken systems, which is not what you're there to do.
absolutely.
So
I mean, even when we talk to certain customers of ours or just having conversations, something that I always encourage just peers in the industry and friends is to even go on to, their into their content library in their company or something, and go and look at up and learn product management, because there's so much synergy between product managers and learning and development. It's on one end we're creating learning solutions and they're creating software products or whatnot, but the process to get there is so similar, and a lot of best practices about digging deep and uncovering, because ultimately you're trying to figure out what's the right product that we need to solve the problem, right? And you need to manage the process to getting there. So that's really insightful as well. what are some of your top questions that you like to ask? Like top three. I know it will be different from every consultation, but any favorite ones that help to just like get through stuff quickly and again to get to outcomes thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I'm laughing because now my team has started to ask these questions. And so it
Yeah.
feels like when I hear somebody else asking my question, I'm like, okay,
Now the industry is going to
they've
ask
learned
your
something.
question.
Yeah. I mean, I think first off is what are we trying to
Yeah.
solve for? Like, what are we trying to fix here? Like, what's really the problem? I think that's number one. And I always ask, what does good look like and what does great look like? So, because there's a big difference between good and great. And, a lot of times they're like, we just need to solve for the good because we just need to get through this like period of time until we can get like a certain tool in place or we can hire more people to help us or we can do something else. And so that helps because it it's so much easier to kind of work on a short-term basis on some big projects than to try to shoot for the moon and you don't really know if you're ever going to get there because you don't have all the right things in place. So like a big example of this is us. We are salesforce.com users. We have multiple instances of salesforce.com. We're trying to merge all of those into one, salesforce.com access point. That is such a huge project. And so we're just starting to, which means you're training some teams because they've merged over, but other teams haven't. So great means you got everything in one platform and you have everybody trained to it, but that is not going to happen for a really long time. So you kind of have to go with, okay, good looks like getting this group into this system and getting them trained and getting them comfortable. And then we'll work on this group. And so it does that. Those two questions help me really understand dream state and then a little bit of reality and what can we do in a short period of
Yeah,
time.
and I think that's a good question too, the good to great, because sometimes when you learn the difference between the two, the great actually might not be that expensive to do. It could be, we just need to add a little bit and make this more experiential or a different element where it's the cost of doing that isn't that expensive. So it might be worthwhile because of scale and impact, to your points earlier as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what? Just looking at the industry, and obviously, it sounds like you talk to a lot of different peers and whatnot in the industry as well. What do you think are some of the biggest operation challenges in L&D right
Oh gosh, I think data integrity and scaling. So I think data integrity meaning you know yeah, you're relying on your human resources systems to tell you who's an employee, who's not an employee, what team are they on, what manager do they work for, because you like when you're onboarding somebody, you have specific content based on the department that they're in or the executive that they work that the umbrella of that executive or even from like a compliance perspective, some teams need different compliance modules than other teams or even countries like international. And we have a lot of problems with at times with data integrity and like understanding where is this employee and where do they fall and what team are they supposed to be on so that we can ensure they get the right training. So I think, and then out of that also is on the flip side of modules when you're doing surveys and you're asking for feedback on your modules or you're trying to understand changes in behavior and things like that. It's not like the data is crystal
now? Hmm.
clear. It's not always as quantitative as you want it to be. It's a lot of qualitative data. And qualitative is always open to an opinion. And so I put that in the data integrity bucket because it just isn't as black and white as I want it to be at times. When people are like, oh, this course is great. Well, that's nice. Like, thank you. But, you know, can't do much with
Yeah.
that. Like, I'm glad it's great. And what would you like to see have done differently or better so that we can constantly um, evolve it. So I think data integrity is a big one, and I think the other one was said the
Hmm.
scale. Um, I think um, for companies my size, there's a lot of big companies that have figured out the scale mechanism. Like they've got 40,000 employees and they can figure out how to do all of these things at broad scale. But when you're little startups or you're kind of under 5,000 employees, like there's these pivot points with number of employees, like 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, where like you really need to be thinking about how you're going to keep
Yeah.
going if you haven't thought about scale. And you know, it's um with little startups, you rely, you're
Yeah.
scrappy, like, and you know, for me being in startups, you know, I'm making a little PowerPoint and I'm doing all these presentations live like all the time, and it's no problem. And then once you start adding thousands of employees to that, and you're still trying to create a strategy for a department, and you're still trying to serve other groups, your ability to do one-off presentations live
Yeah.
diminishes quickly. So, and I think a lot of times why L&D always feels a little bit reactive instead of proactive is because they are not solving for what it needs to look like in 2025 or 2024 or even 2023. You know, I'm already trying to think about what is my department going to look like a year from now if our employees grow by this much. Like, what do I need to be doing with some of these programs
Yeah.
right now? Because we're going to have 1,000 more people in this building. So, you know, I think it's always a struggle to think about scale and growing when your resources are lean.
Do you think that the L&D industry um, has the right operating models and capacity compared to like other departments or functions? You talked about marketing, for example, and whatnot. I mean, where do you think L&D is lacking to get that operational efficiency versus, counterpart functions in the business?
Yeah, well, I think number one is that L&D is seen as a service, not a need. So it's, if you are seen more as a need in the business, I think you would have, it'd be a little bit easier to get some things done. And I think that that's my goal, is always to get my department to be seen as a need, which is why I really try to tie ourselves to tighter metrics and productivity numbers and changes in behavior so that we can show like we're really actually improving what we
Mm-hmm.
do here. Um, but you know, I'm currently under the umbrella of human resources, and oftentimes I kind of wish that we were our own department, um, because you you know, sometimes depending on your company, human resources has different viewpoints, and people view it differently. And every company I've been in, human resources has had a different kind of label as far as it's been valued to the business. So, and a lot of times, human resources isn't seen as a business impact tool. It's seen as, you know, more of a cultural tool to drive and engage employees. And I would much rather be seen as a business lever in a business department. And so there's a lot of times that I kind of wish I was either like on my own, um, or, you know, I haven't even thought about what other department I could might fit on. I think I've been more like, man, I'd love to just be my own department so
Yeah.
that I can just be a chameleon and mix with everybody. I mean, I can now. I think from the outside it would look different if it was a stand up
Yeah,
function.
that makes sense too. And I think the we've actually seen a big shift in a lot more companies looking at learning and development more strategically. I think historically the industry might have looked at L&D a lot as a service, and but think about when COVID happened and a lot of these companies' worlds were flipped upside down, and people literally couldn't come to work and had like no computers, have never worked remote. L&D stood up and taught everybody how to do everything. And I think companies kind of woke up and said, wow, like they helped us do this and like saved our butts. Um, what else can they help us with? Right. And so we're seeing a lot more L&D specific functions where, they have their own, they report into sometimes like the CEO or COO, versus reporting into the CHRO or something like that. So we're seeing more and more of L&D just being its own kind of, have their own identity so that they can measure the impact they have on the business as well, rather than it getting lost in the shuffle of other data because HR might have other initiatives outside of just L&D, if that makes sense.
Yes, totally agree.
And you know you seem, and you said that you thrive on having data. You need that, and that's the type of leader you are. which is great. A lot of people struggle to gather that data. Do you have any tips on, what they should be thinking about or doing in order to demonstrate and articulate some of the impacts on these learning investments? How to even go about getting access to data, what they should be focused on, maybe?
Number one, you need to get an analyst on your team that can drill down on just your basic, whatever systems and tools you're using, understand all that and get just general engagement data, test data, module completion. Did they even go into the system? Like all of that stuff. And having an analyst or having somebody on your team who has an interest in that kind of stuff and encouraging them to do that as a stretch skill, number one thing that you can do. There's so many L&D departments that have, we all have systems that can deliver content, and so many of them are not actually using those systems for metrics of any kind. And I like using an LMS that has a very robust reporting function. Um, and I would love an LMS that has far more robust dashboard options that I can build dashboards, especially even from like a compliance perspective. Otherwise, I'm taking the data out of the LMS system and I'm putting it into a tool like Tableau or Domo and building those
Yeah,
dashboards
I was just
myself.
gonna ask if you have like BI tools set up where you're doing that.
Yeah, I do. So I think an LMS analyst is an extremely wise investment if you can make it happen. Our role is actually a joint role. It's the admin and the analyst all kind of in one. So that person's adminning our system. I think number two is engaging with your people operations team, or and your talent team, whoever does the employee engagement survey, and asking for the full data. So I ask for every single comment and everything from that survey. And I have somebody on my team drill down on the data to pull out any comments related to learning, training, development, career, all of those things. Um, and I think there's a lot to be said for just your good old surveys every now and then. So adding in surveys into your modules at times. We are a Microsoft organization, so we use Microsoft Teams. So we have Teams channels. So doing quick little poll questions about certain things is another way to gather data. Like, were you aware that we even had LinkedIn Learning? Yes, no,
Hmm.
or were you aware that you could even do this? And just querying people, um, I think is really helpful to getting the information that you need. The other thing I also do is reach out to finance to understand what people have spent money on as far as people development, professional development, and programs outside of the company. So I can understand, okay, what are they using? What are they asking for? Is there a vendor that they've used a lot that I need to maybe consider having a more formal relationship with because multiple teams have reached out to this vendor? Those types of things it's also a helpful data point
Hmm.
to understand what I can do.
And speaking of reaching out to finance, a lot of people in L&D specifically, they find themselves, having to defend their budget, or it seems a little harder to build the business cases to get more budget. I mean, why do you think that is? And do you think, being so data centric and being able to access the data helps you with that in securing the investments you need to grow the business?
Yeah, I think first off, it's hard because you're asking for money typically to bring in a vendor, like you're bringing in a tool or you're bringing in like a consultant typically, or one of the
Hmm.
two. And I think to somebody in finance, like, what does that have to do with hiring somebody? What does that have to do with giving somebody the tools that they like, physical tools they need to do their job? What does that have to do with us growing our business? Right? It doesn't make sense, right? To do that. So, whenever I'm asking for those funds, I'm being very clear about its purpose and why we're doing it. And again, kind of going back to that impact statement. So, and I also try to connect everything to our company goals. Or we use OKRs. There's KPIs. There's like whatever acronym you want for
Yeah,
your goals,
yeah.
go with it. But we have certain OKRs that are tied to certain aspects of the business. So if I go out and invest, so we have a diversity and inclusion OKR, I, went invested in an amazing DE&I vendor called MTrain. And I'm like, you need to give me the money for this. Otherwise, we're going to have a harder time meeting this OKR because we don't have any tools that exist to help us meet this particular need.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's connecting back to that too that I think is really, really important. I'm also very, very clear in when I ask for funds on what's a must have and what's a nice to have. So, and I think that's really important because, you know, you're showing that you're not just trying to ask for money to ask for money, but you're showing that you're trying to be cautious about the funds that you're given when you say, hey, I really need to do this. And I would really like to do this, but if we don't, I can figure out another way to make it happen. And that I think shows that you're just being a good finance
Mm-hmm.
partner and you're being wise about the money that you need. The other thing I also do that I think is important is um, there's not a lot of stats out there around the right number of L&D staff to have for per number of employees or per specific departments. Like you can go to meetings and conferences and you can read some studies and they'll say like you should have one sales trainer per 50 sales reps, or you should have, or like some of the big companies like McDonald's, they've got like one L&D person per, I don't know, like 200 or 250 employees, right? But there actually is really no hard fast
Mm-hmm.
standard that you can use to paint the picture of why you need certain people. So I tend to really focus on ratios. So how many people managers do I have in this organization? How many of them have been through a formal learning and development management program? And in and this is how much my team can manage in a program in a quarter. So in order to grow this, like I need you to give me either headcount or funds to make sure that I touch every manager in this company with some type of formal leadership program.
And again, I think being outcomes driven is really smart, and that's something that we even try and teach our team internally here at Cognota to do, because it just paints the picture and the story of where you're trying to get to in 2 seconds, and it allows that finance person or whoever you need to align and partner with to kind of make that happen, see what you're seeing. And so I think that that's really smart as well. I mean, this conversation has been really, really insightful. And I'm really excited to post this for the community and for everybody to see. Before hopping off, is there any other advice that you would recommend to anybody when there's so many people trying to re, reinvent and innovate their learning operating models right now, and just learning operations in general? Is there anything else that you think we didn't cover today that you would recommend, really quickly to for people to think about?
Yeah, I think going back to kind of the idea of strategic and partnerships. So make sure you understand who your partners are in the organization. And there's another layer to that is that understand who your advocates are. And you know if I'm actually a really introverted person, and so it takes a lot for me to kind of get out of my shell and meet with these partners and meet with these stakeholders. So I think you gotta do it. You gotta understand who your stakeholders are, have relationships with them, and then again, like I said, find your advocates and your champions. And I think from a strategic perspective, try to find time to think about how you're going to solve for next year, and try and make an effort to focus on that. Otherwise, you will always be firefighting in today and you'll never kind of get ahead of the game. And so find that time to think about tomorrow and next year, because it will help you in the long run if you can find some ways to think about, okay, I'm going to have to do this differently next year, and how am I going to do
Yeah,
that?
that's good advice. I think L&D needs to think about things top down and bottoms up. From the top level strategy, KPIs or OKRs or goals, whatever you want to call them, to your point, and then bottoms up, like how can we make an impact, with more immediate initiatives that we can partner with. Carrie, this has been really insightful. I'm really excited to have hosted you here. Really appreciative of the time you invested with us today too, and I can't wait to publish this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching the LearnOps Leadership Series. For more episodes like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And visit us at Cognota.com. That's Cognota.com.